Hey everybody, welcome to another live video. It's great to have everybody. The response this week has been phenomenal. So we keep plugging away, trying to provide support and guidance that is simple and useful for teachers and educators around the country, around the world. And yesterday I came across a feed on Facebook, a post on Facebook, and I want to just share it with you. I actually took a screenshot. Um, And I wanted to share with you, I actually posted it in the Teaching with Positivity group that I'd be doing a video on this. And here is what it is. The most effective teachers are the right balance. And you've got these two images here. I don't always use pop culture references, but here you have Mary Poppins on one side, very magical, very nice, very sweet, very kind. Although Mary Poppins was pretty strict, pretty tough with the kids when she first came there. And here you have Tyler Perry's Diary of a Mad Black Woman. Never saw that movie, but definitely a contrast between two personalities and finding the right balance of that. So, you know, when you talk about balancing things, when you talk about balancing being nice, being supportive, being kind, and laying down the law, you know, one of the themes that I very often tell parents, because I work with a lot of parents as well, is that being supportive of undesirable behavior does not mean condoning it. Okay, if somebody does something that is wrong, or if somebody, you know, throws a tantrum, you don't. It's never good to throw a tantrum, but you can validate the frustration that caused the tantrum. You can say, I understand that you were very frustrated and you didn't know what to do with yourself, so you ended up doing this, but this is not good on its own. So that's, you know, something that's important for people to understand, which I'm sure, you know, most teachers do understand this. You know, what always strikes me is, again, to set those boundaries and to talk about how Class Stars, you know, helps to really make the boundaries very, very clear. So, you know, what I tell teachers is that there are certain things that are just objective. There are certain things that are just, you know, you can't be nice about it, because what happens is if you overlook certain misbehaviors, they might be innocent, they might be mild, they might not be too disruptive. But when somebody does something and there's no response to it, very often they take that as a sign that that's okay, and then they'll continue to do it, and they may even take it to the next level, and then to the next level. And then what happens is it comes to a point where now they're going to be punished for it, and that's very confusing for them. So there needs to be an objective system of structure that kids, you know, that you hold kids accountable for. So, for example, one of the things, you know, that we focus on in Class Stars is attendance. Attendance is not subjective. Attendance is either you're there or you're not there, right? So let's jump into a demo here and show you how we do attendance, and especially with real-time attendance. Okay, so here's our Class Stars class. Let's start the session. We're going to go into class, and the first thing that we do is take attendance. And there's really no two ways about it. Okay, if your picture is not faded, you're present. If someone's not there, you just tap on them and they're faded, they're not there. Okay, Kennard is not here, he's absent. Adela is not here, she's absent. Franklin is not here, he's absent. Okay, now if he comes in late, now he's here. So that's it. Those are the two options. Or it could be that he wasn't late. Okay, but he's either here or not here. We end attendance, we go to class. Okay, everybody here is here. If somebody needs to leave the room, swipe them over to the right, and maybe they went out for the restroom. Okay, we'll keep it simple. Okay, that's it. He's not here. There's no, you know, that's it. It is what it is. When he comes back, you double tap on him, and now he's back. And you could see how long he's been out, you know, gives you the time. You can't be nice about it and say, well, really, you were late, but I'm going to mark that you weren't late, because, you know, being absent has certain natural consequences. You missed time. You weren't involved in certain things. You're not going to be up to par with everybody else. You know, I always think that kids that are missing half of the class, whether they're out for the bathroom or at the nurse or for services or whatever it might be, if they get a 50 on the test, that's great, because they were only present half the time. So attendance is something that needs to be purely objective. There's no room for subjectivity in attendance. Now, when it comes to behavior, it's way more complicated, because with behavior, there are certain behaviors that are acceptable, right? While a common misbehavior is getting out of your seat, right? If you swipe down on a kid, you get the undesirable behavior, right? We can go through each and every one of these things. Distracted. If somebody is distracted for a few seconds or whatever it is, there is a spectrum of what is acceptable of being distracted in class. They're, not seated. If somebody's pencil falls on the floor and they get out of their seat to pick it up, that's okay. Talking, there are times that it's acceptable. Everyone's talking. It could be acceptable. Unprepared. Again, you've got to set the boundaries. And again, for younger kids, it's going to be different than for older kids, depending on the nature of how you run your classroom. And every teacher knows how to do that for themselves. But once you make it clear what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, if someone is disruptive, there's a certain kind of disruption that might be acceptable. The advantage here when you're doing it with class stars is that, let's say someone is not seated, you could tap on that. You can also rate the intensity level of how bad of a not seated it was. So you can actually measure if someone is not seated. Now, obviously, if somebody got out of their seat to pick up something that fell on the floor, I wouldn't mark that at all. That's okay. Again, granted that that's appropriate in your environment. But if somebody's doing something that's outside of the boundaries of what's appropriate, you mark it down. You mark it down. And if you're not going to mark it down, don't expect that behavior to stop. We're actually encouraging, when we don't stop misbehaviors, they take that as a sign that it's okay. And I've had so many kids come to me and tell me, I don't understand why my teacher's upset. I've been doing this all year and it was never a problem. Why all of a sudden is this a problem? And the reason is because the teacher is not responding to this. Okay. It's super, super important for you to respond when somebody does something. And again, the response doesn't have to be a punishment. It could just be an acknowledgement, setting the boundaries. You need to set the boundaries. As the adult in the room, it's your responsibility to set the boundaries for the kids. Now, one of the things that we have here in the settings that I often do not show is the event response option. Let's turn that to on. And now watch what happens when Jocelyn is talking. I mark off that she's talking and it's pretty disruptive. Okay, here I've got the response toolbar and I can actually tap on what my response was. The options are observed. I observed it and didn't give any feedback. Positive feedback, I may have given positive feedback. Now, again, how do you give positive feedback when someone's talking? It could be less disruptive. It could be that you're finding a way to give them positive feedback despite their misbehaviors. Good teachers do that all the time. Ignored. Maybe you're just marking that you're ignoring it. You want to ignore it, and it's a conscious decision to ignore it. Sometimes that's constructive as well. You can redirect the student, and you can select more than one response. Sometimes, I mean, obviously, you can't ignore it and redirect them. Ignoring it kind of is to the exclusion of the others. But there's a consequence. There could have been a consequence. You could minimize the triggers. You could use it as a teachable moment, or you can give a warning. And it's key for teachers to be consistent. And this toolbar, when you activate it, allows you to really record that you're responding consistently. It's really meant more for a reminder for you to know that when this student does something, you swipe down on a student, right? When you swipe up, when you're giving a kid positive feedback, you don't get the response toolbar. You only get the response toolbar when you record a misbehavior. So you get the misbehavior, Norman is talking, and now I get this, okay, what's my response? And that kind of reminds you, make sure to respond in the way that is appropriate for that situation. It's now documented, you have it, it's in the dashboards, and you can show that you're responding consistently, because that's one of the key components of that. Okay, so these are all things that need to be objective. Again, there are boundaries to them. You need to set the boundaries, and they are completely objective. You record them as you go, and that's what you have there. Where you have the opportunity to be more, if you want to, going back to that image, you want to have the Mary Poppins type, or even, maybe there's a room for a Tyler Perry type. The best teachers know how to balance that well. The key here is in the positive feedback. You want to make sure that you're giving positive feedback to every kid. You want to, record the positive feedback that you're giving. You have that record. You know exactly who needs it the most, and you can tell who needs it the most based on two very, very important criteria. Number one is that the first tier is that everybody needs. Okay, these kids that haven't gotten Darwin, Kristen, Jess, Gavin, Satara, these most of the kids in the class haven't gotten any. So you're going to start when nobody's gotten, then you just give everybody positive feedback. But after a while, you'll start to see the kids that you're missing, and you prioritize those. Once everybody's gotten, now you're looking at the ratios. The kids that are getting the swipe downs need even more positive feedback to overcome that, and that's indicated by the border colors. So you have your chance to be structured, disciplined, objective, but also extremely, extremely supportive. So this is, this is the way that, in class stars, the way we think about maintaining this balance. The real world is not going to be kind to kids that can't adapt. I tell parents all the time, you may need to be tough with your child, but no one is going to be tough with them in a more loving way than you. And the same thing applies to teachers, to good teachers. Sometimes you have to discipline these kids, and it's hard to. Sometimes you're nice and you want to be kind and caring to them. No one is going to do it with the love that you're doing it with. So again, class stars is a great way to keep track and to be on top of it. But do it, keep track of it, and maintain that balance. See you next time. Take care.